Over the years, we've expanded beyond banking. To owning formidable business subsidiaries across 10 industries, all backed up with AAA Fitch rating. From becoming Nigeria's first registered pension fund administrator to being dubbed the best investment bank in Nigeria, the leading wealth manager, and the largest brokerage house in the country. With over 4,000 employees, our presence across the country is further strengthened by our efficient network of digital channels. Our dedication to the Nigerian dream has granted us recognition 44 times by 18 awarding bodies in 6 sectors, igniting possibilities for more Nigerians and across the seas. We are proud to be champions of exponential trade finance through our partnership with the largest bank in the world, facilitated across 22 sectors. Nigeria is our home and we are committed to driving her growth. So whatever your dream is, we believe it can be. Once upon a time, an idea was born. It grew into one institution with a master plan. Since 1989, IBTC has evolved to become Stanbic IBTC, setting the pace as one of the first holding companies in Nigeria. Over the years, we've expanded beyond banking to owning formidable business subsidiaries across 10 industries, all backed up with AAA Fitch rating. From becoming Nigeria's first registered pension fund administrator to being dubbed the best investment bank in Nigeria, the leading wealth manager, and the largest brokerage house in the country. With over 4,000 employees, our presence across the country is further strengthened by our efficient network of digital channels. Our dedication to the Nigerian dream has granted us recognition 44 times by 18 awarding bodies in 6 sectors, igniting possibilities for more Nigerians and across the seas. We are proud to be champions of exponential trade finance through our partnership with the largest bank in the world, facilitated across 22 sectors. Nigeria is our home and we are committed to driving her growth. So whatever your dream is, we believe it can be.
The Society for Corporate Governance Nigeria is a registered not-for-profit organization. It is the foremost institution committed to the development of corporate governance and best practices in Nigeria. Our vision is to enhance the development of good corporate governance practices, while our mission is to be the leading player in the development and promotion of corporate governance best practices nationally and internationally. Our offerings include board evaluation and governance advisory, directors training and board enhancement programs, research and publications, and membership. Being a statutory requirement for corporate organizations, the Society for Corporate Governance assists organizations to evaluate their boards by conducting a board performance evaluation assessment to specifically measure and ultimately enhance performance and also mete out corporate governance advisory. The Society, as part of our learning programs, organizes executive and board enhancement programs designed to specifically address issues that affect different boards. Our upcoming programs include IT governance, Implementing Governance Structure for Data Protection and Cybersecurity, scheduled to hold on Thursday, October 28, 2021, and Corporate Governance and the Pensions Industries, scheduled to hold on Thursday, November 25, 2021. Our membership platform has a wide range of professionals interested in corporate governance and ethics. Membership of the Society is guided by the Constitution of the Society, and it is open to individuals who occupy managerial positions and above in their organizations. While our corporate membership is open to all corporate organizations, which include private, public, and registered firms. For more information on membership, please contact our membership desk via membership@corpgovnigeria.org or call 0703 157 2499. We also offer educative and informative research and publications. Our available publications include Biannual Journal of Corporate Governance, Company Secretary's Guide on Corporate Governance, 2nd edition, Corporate Governance and Regulatory Compliance, The Regulator, Regulations, and the Regulated, Corporate Governance and Sustainability Reporting in Nigeria, a review of 30 most capitalized companies on Nigerian Stock Exchange 2020, Corporate Governance Reporting in Nigeria 2019, Director's Handbook on Corporate Governance, Leading an Effective Board, the Chairman's Guide, Understanding Financial Statements and Reports, a Guide for Directors, Survey on the Board Structure and Corporate Governance for Microfinance Banks in Nigeria. To order any of these titles, please contact us via research@corpgovnigeria.org. Electronic copies of our publications are also available on Okada Books, Kobo Writing Life, and Amazon stores. SCGN, committed to the development of corporate governance.
Once upon a time, an idea was born. It grew into one institution with a master plan. Since 1989, IBTC has evolved to become Stanbic IBTC, setting the base as one of the first holding companies in Nigeria. Over the years, we've expanded beyond banking to owning formidable business subsidiaries across 10 industries, all backed up with AAA Fitch rating. From becoming Nigeria's first registered pension fund administrator to being dubbed the best investment bank in Nigeria, the leading wealth manager, and the largest brokerage house in the country. With over 4,000 employees, our presence across the country is further strengthened by our efficient network of digital channels. Our dedication to the Nigerian dream has granted us recognition 44 times by 18 awarding bodies in 6 sectors, igniting possibilities for more Nigerians. And across the seas, we are proud to be champions of exponential trade finance through our partnership with the largest bank in the world, facilitated across 22 sectors. Nigeria is our home, and we are committed to driving her growth. So whatever your dream is, we believe it can be.
The Society for Corporate Governance Nigeria is a registered not-for-profit organization. It is the foremost institution committed to the development of corporate governance and best practices in Nigeria. Our vision is to enhance the development of good corporate governance practices, while our mission is to be the leading player in the development and promotion of corporate governance best practices nationally and internationally. Our offerings include board evaluation and governance advisory, directors training and board enhancement programs, research and publications, and membership. Being a statutory requirement for corporate organizations, the Society for Corporate Governance assists organizations to evaluate their boards by conducting a board performance evaluation assessment to specifically measure and ultimately enhance performance and also mete out corporate governance advisory. The Society, as part of our learning programs, organizes executive and board enhancement programs designed to specifically address issues that affect different boards. Our upcoming programs include IT governance, implementing governance structure for data protection and cybersecurity, scheduled to hold on Thursday, October 28, 2021, and corporate governance and the pensions industries, scheduled to hold on Thursday, November 25th, 2021. Our membership platform has a wide range of professionals interested in corporate governance and ethics. Membership of the Society is guided by the Constitution of the Society, and it is open to individuals who occupy managerial positions and above in their organizations. While our corporate membership is open to all corporate organizations, which include private, public, and registered firms. For more information on membership, please contact our membership desk via membership@corpgovnigeria.org or call 0703 157 2499. We also offer educative and informative research and publications. Our available publications include Biannual Journal of Corporate Governance, Company Secretary's Guide on Corporate Governance, 2nd edition, Corporate Governance and Regulatory Compliance, The Regulator, Regulations, and the Regulated, Corporate Governance and Sustainability Reporting in Nigeria, a review of 30 most capitalized companies on Nigerian Stock Exchange 2020, Corporate Governance Reporting in Nigeria 2019, Director's Handbook on Corporate Governance, Leading an Effective Board, the Chairman's Guide, Understanding Financial Statements and Reports, a Guide for Directors, Survey on the Board Structure and Corporate Governance for Microfinance Banks in Nigeria. To order any of these titles, please contact us via research@corpgovnigeria.org. Electronic copies of our publications are also available on Okada Books, Kobo Writing Life, and Amazon stores. SCGN, committed to the development of corporate governance.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2021 Annual Corporate Governance Conference of the Society for Corporate Governance. It is 10:59 a.m. We have one more minute to start as we welcome people joining us online. Good morning. I can see that we have a lot of people coming in. Please admit all as they come in. Good morning. Thank you. So this is 11 o'clock. Welcome to the Society for Corporate Governance 2021 Annual Corporate Governance Conference. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome everybody this morning. Drop your comments on the chat box just to say hi and welcome. I can see comments dropping already. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy to welcome you as well. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for the comments. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. Please keep the comments coming. You can comment, please. You can drop it on the chat box using the chat box. Good morning, Mr. President. I can see you online. Good morning, sir. Good morning, speaker. I can see you're also online. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you and welcome again. I think we need to start right away. It's 11:01 and I think the remaining registered participants will join as we proceed. So as we start this event, may I please ask that we take the national anthem. The technical crew, can we take the national anthem, please? Thank you very much and welcome again. Thank you. Good morning to everybody here in Nigeria. It's 11:09 time. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to the 2021 Annual Corporate Governance Conference. Foremost, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our President and the Board Chairman, Mr. M.K. Ahmad OON, and the distinguished directors of the Society for Corporate Governance. I appreciate you all for your tremendous support you have provided as the host of this conference. Good morning. Very big welcome to all our esteemed guests as well, our members, fellows of the Society for Corporate Governance, our individual and corporate members, press men and women present here. I'd like to say a very big thank you for joining us. It's so good to have you with us this morning. The Annual Corporate Governance Conference has over the years been hosted by the Society for Corporate Governance. And we spare no effort in raising awareness about corporate governance implementations of these principles. The theme for this year's conference, as you know, is emerging trends in corporate governance with key focus on ESG, board diversity, regulation, and digital transformation. Uniquely placed to champion discussion today are international and national experts and executives who have come from different parts of the world and different regions of this world. Our keynote speaker for today is Ms. Karen Waring. Our panelists, Mrs. Nkemdeline Bego, Ms. Rukayat El-Rufai, Ms. Rose Lumumba, Mr. Tenny Popola, who will take part in an enriching discourse to propose solutions in dealing with corporate governance challenges and entrenching global governance standards for business best practices. I am also pleased to inform you that in concurrence with this year's conference is the presentation of 2 publications. I hope you will enjoy today and the next few hours of discussion. This year, we are fortunate to have the support of a great cadre of sponsors, which include Zenith Bank PLC, Stanbic IBTC, Flour Mills of Nigeria PLC, OVH Energy, Polaris Bank PLC, Kenna Partners, whom I hope you will get to meet during the conference. I also like to acknowledge our media partners, ProShare Media, our IT partners, Futuresoft Resources Limited, who have assisted us greatly in promoting the conference and creating strong awareness. I'd like to say a very big thank you for joining us today. And I would like to then move, will I call it the microphone now, given that We are all here virtually. But the next stage of the agenda of this conference is the opening remarks by our president. So if you're ready, I would like to you. Thank you. So are you ready for your opening remarks? Bear with us. I will just try and connect with him. So are you ready for your—
Sorry, I think I've just, yes, I'm sorry. Good morning, distinguished board members, representative of agencies, companies, organizations, and esteemed participants, and of course, distinguished members and fellows of our association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this annual governance conference, and I greet you all. We're indeed honored and privileged to have Ms. Carey, the CEO of International Corporate Governance Network, London, as the key and of course lead paper presenter. Despite very short notice and her very busy schedule, she was able to be with us today. This clearly underscores the underlying efforts in promoting strong corporate governance and culture and building networks across the world. We're also fortunate to have very distinguished members of panel of discussants. You're all welcome to this conference. Last year, the conference was held virtually because of the outbreak of COVID-19. This forced us to remain indoors in a bid to isolate and prevent further spread of the virus. It was, however, my wish that we could also meet in person this year. Sadly, we're still with COVID, of course, with different names. Your safety remains our priority, and it's therefore our duty to maintain social distance, and thus the reason why we're still holding this conference this year virtually. Esteemed guests and participants, as you know, the concept of corporate governance has been the primary agenda within the framework of problems that companies face in this country and of course in different parts of the world. As it was once said, corporate governance is about being power, being proper, and also being right. It has become a known fact that when a board of directors sits down to look at the wisdom of embarking on any strategic plan or path, whether it be to expand, contract, or diversify business, there are basically two chief considerations: risk and return, which many boards today go for rewards, believing that risk will take care of itself. Nevertheless, it is worthy to note that corporate governance principles are not static or solid principles within cast in stone. These principles differ according to environmental factors, economic circumstances, development levels, and of course, legal system. When change is approached and understood, such principles can better be understood in terms of the changing environment. However, the basic principles remain the same. This year's theme is emerging trends in corporate governance, particularly looking at the ESGs, or diversity, regulation, and of course, digital transformation. And consistent with this theme, 2 books will be launched at this conference later during our deliberations. I must therefore commend the management of Society for Corporate Governance Nigeria for a well-captured theme, and for the research team, having done a very thorough job in terms of the 2 books we are presenting today. Corporate Governance and Sustainability Reporting, a review for top most capitalized companies in Nigeria on Nigerian exchange. And of course, a survey report on corporate governance and board structure in the agri sector in Nigeria, given the fact that agriculture today in this country has a prominent role. The government has consistently, together with the Central Bank of Nigeria, at the forefront of promoting agriculture in Nigeria. I hope this conference will assist participants to understand the steps that need to be taken, the tools, concepts, and frameworks for conducting a very comprehensive evaluation of existing practices within the framework of international best practices, what must be done in this respect in the future. In conclusion, distinguished participants, members of the panel, and of course our keynote speaker, I would like to state that the Society for Corporate Governance in Nigeria will continue its efforts in promoting good corporate governance within a framework that is compatible with international corporate governance practices and principles. And I believe the support provided by you as distinguished players in the corporate governance space will continue, as well as progress will be attained in a more flexible and perhaps a more productive manner. While I look forward to fruitful and engaging conference, please, I request that we get engaged, listen, understand, and share experiences. And that is the essence of this conference. Once again, I distinguish members of the board, members and fellows, other participants, and of course, our keynote speaker, and I distinguished members of panel. It's indeed an honor to once again welcome you to this conference. And I hope and pray it's going to be a very fruitful conference. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your remarks. Indeed, it highlights some of the agendas of the Society for Corporate Governance and also what we look out for during this conference. So next on the agenda is a conference discussion. And to take this session, I would like to invite our director, Mrs. Icgm Bego, to introduce the keynote speaker and moderate the panel discussion. Mrs. Bego, if you're ready, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chioma. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Annual Corporate Governance Conference. Today, we're very excited to welcome our keynote speaker, Mrs. Kerry Waring. She's the CEO of the International Corporate Governance Network London, Icgn, and she will be speaking to us on the board's role and responsibility in a sustainable world. Kerry is the Chief Executive of the International Corporate Governance Network, a global governance organization led by investors responsible for assets of $59 trillion based in over 40 countries. She also serves as a member of the Japan Financial Services Agency's Council of Experts advising on corporate governance and investor stewardship reforms. Prior to her appointment to Icgn in 2008, Kerry directed high-profile governance initiatives at the Institute for Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, where she led cross-Atlantic initiatives. Earlier, she was an international professional development manager at the UK Institute of Directors, where she established IOD International and the Global Director Development Circle, now known as the Global Network of Director Institutes. More recently, she established the Global Stewardship Codes Network, an international group of regulators responsible for code development, and the Global Network of Investor Associations. Kerry is a lead author of the IFC, which has helped establish governance associations around the world, and co-authored the Handbook on International Corporate Governance in 2004, among a series of other publications. Kerry was named Rising Star of Corporate Governance by the Milstein School of Corporate Governance and Performance at the Yale School of Management in 2008. A chartered company secretary and fellow of ICSA, she holds a BA honors degree in international business and Japanese. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kerry. With that, I will hand over to you.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I seem to be having trouble with the video cam. So I am actually going to just dial off and dial on very quickly because I'd really like to see you all. So if you just bear with me for 1 minute, I promise I will be very quick. I'm just realizing the video camera is not working. Otherwise, you will just have to hear me. But just let me give this a go. I'll be 2 seconds. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you so much, Kerry. While we wait for Carrie to come back, I'm just going to give some housekeeping rules. You can put your questions in the Q&A while she's speaking, so that by the time her presentation is done, she will be able to respond to the questions. Okay, I see that Carrie is back and there was video for a few seconds. Oh, there we go.
Yay! Oh, the wonders of technology. I turned it off and on and it seemed to have worked.
Fantastic. All right, so, over to you, Carrie.
Just a moment. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Well, look, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you all here today. And I'm very grateful to Chioma and Mr. Ahmed for inviting me. I'm very honoured to be here at this very important conference organised by the Society for Corporate Governance in Nigeria. You are all doing such important work and it's very appreciated by global investors all around the world. So today I would like to take the opportunity of introducing the latest changes to the Icgn Global Governance Principles, which were approved by Icgm members just a couple of weeks ago. First published in 2001, the Icgm Principles are used by many of our members as a bellwether for their voting policies and company engagements around the world. And remembering the weight of assets under management that Icgn members have, around 60 trillion assets under management, this is quite an influential document. In fact, many other governments around the world also use the Icgm Principles as a way to inspire some of the national developments. But perhaps before we delve into what the changes are this year, we could just reflect on what we actually mean by corporate governance and how this relates to the concept of sustainability that we all hear so much about. Fundamentally, corporate governance is the system by which companies are directed and controlled based on the principles of fairness, accountability, responsibility, and transparency. This, of course, is imperative to ensure investor confidence, contributing towards efficient capital allocation and effectively functioning capital markets. Boards are responsible for promoting the long-term success of company through managerial oversight, strategic direction, risk assessment, and reporting. And investors hold companies to account for doing so through the exercise of shareholder rights, including company monitoring, voting, and engagement, otherwise known as stewardship responsibilities. But Icgn believes that ultimately both companies and investors, they share a mutual responsibility to preserve and enhance long-term corporate value. And in doing so, they must focus not only on aspects relating to a company's financial value, but also on factors impacting the health of society, the environment, and also the economy. So in essence, this is really all about the governance of sustainability and the role of the board in overseeing the integration of financial, human, and natural capital management in alignment with the company's purpose and long-term strategy. And I like to refer to the definition published by the European High-Level Expert Group on Sustainable Finance in 2019 in terms of sustainability. And they said this means making economic prosperity long-lasting, more socially inclusive, and less dependent on the exploitation of finite resources and the natural environment. This, of course, is really poignant in the context of a world facing systemic challenges of the highest magnitude with the COVID pandemic and the climate change. Stark social inequalities have been exposed and public mistrust in capitalism propagated like never before. So how we address these risks and level up across society is key to successfully rebooting the global economy, while at the same time creating a healthier and more sustainable planet for all of us. So it's against this backdrop that the Icgn Global Governance Principles were revised as part of a 3-year review cycle. We have literally dozens of changes to the principles this year. So I thought what I would do is to reflect on, if you like, a top 10 of changes relating to more traditional corporate governance aspects, and then also introduce you to 10 changes relating to more sustainability related aspects. So in terms of the key corporate governance changes, we start off with leadership, and we've emphasised the importance of independent board leadership and a clear division of responsibilities between the chair and the CEO to avoid unfettered powers of decision-making being in one individual. And we also think that the roles of both should be clearly disclosed and described and made available to the public and shareholders. On independence, we have strengthened our standard for a majority of independent directors on the board, and not just in companies with widely held share ownership structures common in the US and the UK or Canada and Australia, but also for those with concentrated share ownership models, frankly, the rest of the world, and subsidiaries. In terms of diversity, board diversity guidance should encourage effective, equitable, and inclusive decision-making across the workforce and on the board, in alignment with the company's purpose and key stakeholders. And we've separated out specific guidance for gender diversity, with a preference for at least 1/3 of board positions to be held by women. In terms of board evaluation, we emphasise the importance of conducting evaluations annually to review composition, again, in alignment with the company's long-term strategy, succession planning, and diversity policy. And we maintain the importance of having external board evaluation conducted once every 3 years. Our reference to board tenure has been enhanced to clarify that term limits where they exist, and the identity of the directors who have exceeded limits and are thus no longer deemed to be independent. These limits should be disclosed. More generally, we believe that director tenure and re-election should be contingent on a satisfactory performance evaluation of his or her contribution to the board. On board appointments, there should be a formal and transparent approach to board director appointments based on relevant and objective selection criteria led by an independent nomination committee to ensure appropriate board refreshment aligned with the company's long-term strategy, succession planning, and diversity policy. On capital allocation, there is new guidance to manage and disclose how the board resolves competing company, investor, and stakeholder interests while maintaining sufficient liquidity to ensure resilience. We have acknowledged public debate around tax avoidance by emphasising the board's role and accountability in overseeing the company's tax policy, but only within a legal, not only within a legal context, but within the bounds of acceptable social norms. In relation to audit, the work of the audit committee should be explained in the annual report. There should be engagement with shareholders on any significant issues arising from the audit relating to the financial statements and how they were addressed. Additionally, shareholders will want to know about the effectiveness of the audit process itself, including audit tender, audit tenure, independence, fees, and any non-audit services provided. Finally, in relation to fundamental corporate governance changes in the principles, and primarily instigated by the COVID crisis, we have added new principles emphasising the importance of shareholder participation at AGMs, particularly virtual AGMs, to ensure that they are efficiently, democratically, and securely facilitated. Now, this reflects a general anxiety of Icgm members around potential infringements to shareholder rights to hold boards to account through voting statements and questions at virtual AGMs, particularly around contentious proposals. So companies really should take care to remove any artificial barriers to participation and reflect as best as possible the in-person AGM experience to enable constructive interactivity between shareholders and the board to take place. So moving on to the sustainability related changes. Firstly, we clarify that the board should disclose a company purpose to guide management's approach to strategy, innovation and risk. And this is usually accompanied by a statement of values which describe a set of beliefs shared by the board and the workforce, ingrained in behaviours and in corporate culture, And by defining a company purpose, the board is better able then to identify a company's key stakeholders and to disclose how their interests are considered. Thirdly, we clarify directors' duties to promote the best interests of the company, thereby preserving and enhancing long-term share value while having regard to relevant stakeholder interests. I think more generally, the perception of fiduciary duty for directors is evolving. Earlier this year, the European Parliament announced plans for a new binding law that ensures companies are held accountable and liable when they harm human rights, the environment, and good governance. And as we emerge from the COVID crisis, the degree to which directors have upheld their duties is being challenged in some markets with shareholder litigation. For example, where board directors have not properly disclosed pandemic-related risks, despite them being aware of the negative impacts on the business. Employees in some markets are also holding directors to account for failures in the oversight of management to implement adequate health and safety procedures to prevent the spread of the virus. And alongside this, according to a recent OECD report, in the second quarter of 2020, average prices of insurance premiums to protect directors increased by around 60% in the US and more than doubled in the UK, again, due to the COVID-related factors. So I think ultimately board directors really should ensure that companies have robust processes to keep them sufficiently informed of systemic risks. And they must be prepared to devote time to board meetings, so don't be overboarded sitting on many boards. Take steps to educate them yourselves, such as the excellent programs that the Society offers. This is extremely important for upholding your directors' duties. Moving on to risk oversight, this has also been expanded in the Icgm Principles, particularly systemic risks, including ecological degradation, social inequality, and digital transformation. And this is alongside usual threats to the business model, including cybersecurity, supply chain resilience, a topic of particular importance in the UK right now, but of course around the world as well. Performance, solvency, liquidity, and reputation. We have added new reference to double materiality. So this is for reporting on a company's external impacts on society and the environment, as well as internal impacts on the company's own financial performance. We also refer to dynamic materiality, recognizing that materiality evolves over time alongside emerging technology, product innovation, regulatory developments, and so on. And these concepts of double and dynamic materiality really overlay our traditional understanding of materiality, being information that a reasonable investor would consider in making an investment or voting decision. Moving on to executive remuneration. Plans should be designed to align the interests of the CEO and senior executives fairly and effectively with the workforce and long-term company strategy, including the use of sustainability-related metrics. This year, investors will expect remuneration committees to disclose a clear rationale for their decisions, particularly for companies that received public financial support as part of COVID recovery plans. So I think the spotlight will be on things like any changes to bonus schemes, including adjustments to performance targets or measurement periods, fairness and how CEO incentives compare with the average company worker, including pension and other benefits like life insurance or medical insurance, and how sustainability metrics used in KPIs, particularly those aligned with reducing carbon emissions according to the company's net zero transition plan. The Icgm principles now call for companies to disclose information about their human capital policies, practices, and performance linked to succession planning and long-term strategy. We welcomed a change of reporting rules by the US Securities and Exchange Commission last year to require companies to report material human capital objectives And this theme is referenced in Japan's updated corporate governance code this year, with lots of references to human capital management. So investors would really like more information from companies on this subject. For example, around workforce training, lost time injury rates, pay ratios, turnover, demographics, and details around workforce diversity, particularly in relation to recruitment, retention, and promotion. And this information is something that companies will already have. So it's not a case of actually trying to look or create new types of information. There's also new reference to workforce safety and how companies manage and mitigate risks in operations and supply chains. This extends to human rights abuses, particularly modern slavery, and the board's role in overseeing due diligence, reporting and accountability processes. In terms of climate change, we urge boards to assess the risks and opportunities from climate change on the business model and to disclose a clear transition plan on how it will be adapted to meet the needs of a net zero economy by 2050. And this plan should be aligned with publicly declared targets as part of a long-term strategy. This is really important because it helps investors understand company resilience in addressing climate change risks and opportunities, as well as assessing progress towards achieving net zero targets. And then in turn, of course, investors themselves are better able to disclose how their own portfolios are aligned for net zero transition. And finally, on sustainability reporting, we encourage companies to use sustainability-related accounting and reporting frameworks to facilitate consistency and comparability across markets and industries. Icgn supports the proposed establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board. We must improve the quantity, quality, and comparability of climate-related disclosures in particular, and we support the need for a common framework, for example, based around the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosures. More generally, in terms of corporate reporting as we emerge from the COVID crisis, it is incumbent on companies to demonstrate their approach to recovery and resilience in the annual report, and investors will want to discuss cash flow, risk scenario planning, and capital allocation approaches. So there's an awful lot to consider here, but ultimately the proper governance of sustainability is no longer a nice to have, it absolutely is a must have. It's incumbent on companies to create value not only for shareholders, but for all stakeholders, employing their resources into actively addressing social and environmental risks and opportunities now and into the future. And investors must act as guardians of good governance through the proper use of share ownership and responsible stewardship practices. I really think as business leaders and institutional investors in positions of influence, we share a common imperative as laid out in the UN Sustainable Development Goals to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all. This is a collective global ambition which we must all share and act upon to help ensure that future generations benefit from long-term economic prosperity, social inclusiveness, and a healthy environment. So it's in this spirit that I offer my remarks to you today, and I wish you well for a very successful conference. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you so much, Kerry. That was
Thank you.
very interesting and very inspiring. And I know that you've also offered to share the Icgn principle guidelines with us, which we will make available to all the participants of this conference. There are a couple of questions that we have here in the chat. I hope that you still have a few minutes to respond to these questions. So the first question is around securing investments during the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, there's been a lot of erosion of, I guess, share capital. So how can shareholders protect their investments from a corporate governance angle?
So again, I mean, this is thinking about how the boards have evolved in terms of their response to the COVID crisis. I think in particular, there's been a lot of engagement and focus on the board's role in identifying, monitoring and managing risk in particular, and how boards have learnt to respond quickly to the crisis. It's been a very challenging year for everybody, including Icgn, but that is ultimately one of the ways in which investors are able to help ensure that their investments are protected. We must also acknowledge that, in fact, the investment industry has actually performed, this sounds terrible, but it's performed very well throughout the COVID crisis, because investors have been very focused on being able to analyse which companies are coping through the crisis better than others, perhaps. And of course, that's also dependent on industry. So I think the lesson for corporate boards is to really be aware that investors do expect you to pay close attention to your approach to risk management and internal controls.
All right, thank you so much. We have another question from the president of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. So he says that obviously in order to put all of these different new principles in place, you need a lot of capacity as well as resources. And his question here is, how can smaller companies, sort of go on the path of really good corporate governance, but obviously with limited resources and limited capacity? What is your advice for them?
So I would say that even small companies are probably doing already a lot of great corporate governance practices. It's just about interpreting what investors define as being corporate governance. And in that regard, please do read the Icgm Global Governance Principles. It's a very educational piece of work. It's actually sits alongside the OECD principles, if you like, which were originally written for regulators and markets. The Icgm principles are written from a global investor perspective and really focus on the aspects that investors would expect to see on boards. So even as a small company, you're going to have a board. And so just think about some of the recommendations on board diversity. Think about, do you have an annual evaluation? If so, is that an internal procedure or an external procedure? I think there are lots of quick wins, and it doesn't need to be as painful as perhaps some companies might think. And actually it will really substantially increase your reputation in the market. And reach out to the Icgn if you want some advice on how you might be able to quickly elevate your standing with global investors in terms of your corporate governance credibility, and disclose more information. You're already doing a lot of great stuff. Just tell us about it.
Okay, great. There's one last question that we have here, and it's basically about the evaluations, the board evaluations. So the person asking says he agrees that it's good to have board evaluations, but shouldn't there be more than just the annual evaluation? Shouldn't there be some type of evaluation of sort of on a self-assessment basis for each board meeting, which should include the CEO or board committee's assessment as well? What do you think about this? And is this doable or a little bit too much?
So that's a great question. And yes, I do think there should be more granularity on the board evaluation process. I'm not sure I would advocate that that should happen at every board meeting. But I do think the board evaluation should be conducted for the collective board, see how the collective decision-making work. It should be done for the individual committees, and it should be done for the individual directors themselves. And definitely, of course, the CEO should be evaluated on an annual basis, usually by the nomination or the governance committee. What I think is important with the evaluation process is, don't use any bog standard evaluation process. Create a questionnaire that's useful for you. Think about your company purpose, think about your long-term strategy. Do you have the right skills on the board now or in 3 years' time to help your company transition towards that strategy? And then also think about your succession planning for boards that are rotating off, and your diversity policy. Please do have and disclose a public diversity, equity and inclusion policy, which then gives you a framework to express the kinds of things that you're needing in an optimal board composition. And then your board assessment should be assessed against that every year. It should be a fairly straightforward process to do an internal evaluation every year, and investors will expect you to disclose the results, not in detail, but the process at least for evaluation. And it is good practice to conduct an external board evaluation every 3 years, really for independence reasons.
Okay, great, thank you. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure, I can take one more question, that's fine.
Okay, there's one question that talks about, the corporate governance code and practice are being improved all the time, but companies are still collapsing. What could the problem be, and why is this still happening?
That question is difficult to answer depending on the company, and it's been incredibly tough for companies, over the COVID period. And it's likely to get tougher for everybody as we embrace the challenges that climate change is posing, biodiversity loss, water scarcity, pollution, the digital transformation. It is tough to be on a board these days. I guess what I would say to that, though, is, as a CEO myself, I'll be honest with you, Icgn faced a cliff edge last year. We had to completely rework our funding model, and we managed to do it. We increased fees by 160%. We eradicated our reliance on conference revenue. So I would say it is fundamentally about, the quality of your CEO and management team, the quality of the board overseeing the business plan, keeping your eye on the external risk factors and understanding, even when you are faced with an incredible event like COVID, can you pivot? Many companies have pivoted very successfully and come out of this crisis in a much more innovative state. Unfortunately, other companies have really not been able to manage, and that isn't due to, perhaps poor CEO oversight. That is just a fact of life. I'm not sure that answer has been very helpful, but I think it is down to the quality of the leadership and the board.
All right, thank you so much, Kerry, and thank you for your time. We really appreciate you sharing so generously, and I think it's really also great that you've shared the Icgm principles with us so that we can share with the conference participants. So thank you so much for being here this morning, and we wish you a lovely day.
Not at all. Thank you to you too. It's been a wonderful pleasure to be here, and stay in touch. I look forward to hearing more about your good work. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye. All right, and with that, we will move on to the panel discussion, which I will be moderating. Just for those who are just joining, my name is Icgm Principles, and I'm the CEO of Futuresoft. I'm also a director of the Society for Corporate Governance. And we've been talking about new principles for corporate governance. And I think with the COVID pandemic, global warming, social justice movements, and the digital transformation, we've had far-reaching impacts on business and society around the world. In many ways, we're at a turning point, and corporate governance trends vary somewhat across regions, but corporations globally are experiencing a reckoning around their role in society, as our keynote speaker has already aptly highlighted. There will be a heightened focus on board effectiveness. Directors are having to consider an increasingly broad range of issues, as she's also mentioned in her 10 changes in corporate governance. And with that, there's an increasing pressure on boards to limit the number of external mandates a director can have, which will help ensure that members can be fully dedicated to the boards which they serve on. We're also seeing that diversity will continue to dominate the corporate governance agenda. Increasing female participation in leadership roles is one of the many areas boards are addressing. To achieve the turnover necessary to accommodate increasing diversity goals, board will pursue more extensive director refreshment practices, shorter term limits, performance evaluation, and retirement requirements will see wider application, as Ms. Waring already said. We also expect that boards will face increasing pressure to become more ESG competent, and she did share 10 principles on sustainability. And this will also demonstrate the skills needed to prepare for and navigate other challenges such as climate change. The shift to virtual operations has now solidified digital resilience as a core focus among leadership. all part of a larger digital transformation movement now in overdrive. Cybersecurity is no longer an IT problem. It is an enterprise-wide risk management issue that requires the oversight from the board of directors to set the environment for good cybersecurity culture. The other far-reaching impact we see is the accelerated shift from shareholder centricity to stakeholder centricity, where organizations are continually reevaluating their relationship with all stakeholders and society at large. This impacts causes they support, suppliers they select, how they communicate, and what they lend their voices to. And we will be discussing this in a lot more detail. And I have the pleasure of inviting my panelists to join the discussion. And I will read their bios as I introduce them. Our first panelist is Ms. Rukaya El-Rufai, PwC Nigeria's lead on SCCS. Ms. Rukaya El-Rufai is PwC's Nigeria lead on sustainable and climate change services and a public sector risk assurance services. Rukaya holds an MPA in public policy and management from the prestigious London School of Economics and Political Science and Hertie School of Governance, Berlin. She graduated from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, where she studied accounting. She's a chartered accountant with over 15 years of industry and consulting work experience. Her experience spans consulting and blue chip companies in the Nigerian telecommunications industry, where she has held several roles prior to joining PwC. She has advised a broad range of public and private sector clients on issues across the sustainability value chain in Nigeria, as well as supporting transformational agendas and efforts for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Her experience covers development of comprehensive strategies, roadmaps for sustainable development, covering the triple bottom line of people, planet, and prosperity. With a practical top-level experience at the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, where she served as special advisor to the Minister on National Revenue Matters, including domestic resource mobilization, and a broader note, fiscal sustainability. Rukaya brings to bear her understanding of the Nigerian market and industry value chain, as well as her understanding of sustainability and climate change, including net zero strategies, climate finance, circular economy, and projects that support sustainable development in Nigeria. She advises clients from the private and public sectors in identifying impact areas that align with global best practices towards achieving their sustainability aspirations and UN SDGs. She's a regular speaker at conferences and training dedicated to development and sustainability. Welcome, Ms. El-Rufai, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. Our second speaker today is Mr. Olufemi Shobanjo. He's the head of Broker-Dealer Regulations Department at NGX Regulations, and he is ably representing Mr. Temi Pupola, who's the CEO of the Nigerian Exchange Limited, who could not be here today, but sends his regards and obviously has sent Mr. Shobanjo to represent him. Mr. Shobanjo is the head of the Broker-Dealer Regulation Department at NGX Regulations Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Exchange Group. Prior to NGX Regulation, he was the head Broker-Dealer Regulation Department at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, responsible for the regulation and supervision of over 250 stockbroking firms in the Nigerian capital market. He has over 17 years of professional experience spanning across corporate and commercial law, compliance and regulation, banking and financial markets. Prior to the exchange, he worked for a couple of leading financial institutions in the UK, including Anglo-Irish Bank Corporations and HSBC Global Banking and Markets as part of the compliance and advisory monitoring team. He holds a law degree, LLB, from the University of Birmingham, UK, and a master's degree in international commercial law, LLM, from Cardiff Law University, University of Wales. He has also attended several professional courses and is an alumni of the Lagos Business School, having completed the senior management program. He's an associate member of the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investments UK, an associate member of the Institute of Capital Market Registrars of Nigeria, and a member of the Nigerian Bar Association. Thank you so much for being here today, Mr. Shobanjo, and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. And last but not least, I would like to introduce and welcome Ms. Rose Lumumba, Corporate Governance Specialist at IFC. Rose works for the International Finance Corporation, IFC, as a corporate governance specialist. She has specialized in the development of corporate governance frameworks, is a trainer of trainers in corporate governance and board evaluator. She provides corporate governance interventions to companies, businesses, regulators, and market intermediaries across sub-Saharan Africa. She has contributed to the authorship of corporate governance tools for corporation secretaries, boards, and companies, including SMEs. She has vast experience in capital markets, regulation practices in emerging markets, having worked in the securities industry as an investment banker and regulator in the industry for close to 20 years. Rose is an AOEC accredited executive coach who passionately walks with corporate executives to reach their goals. In line with her passion of empowering leaders, Rose co-founded the Women on Boards Network, which builds capacity for women with an aim to developing women ready for corporate leadership. Rose holds a Bachelor of Law and a Master's degree in Business Administration and is currently undertaking a doctorate in Business Administration. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Lumumba, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Again, we would like to run a quick poll before we jump into the panel discussion. And the question that we have is, which of these emerging trends in corporate governance are you seeing in your own industries? So the poll is now showing on the screen. If you can just select, and then we will also display the results. All right, let us know when the results are in. Some people are saying they can't see the polls. Is everyone else able to see the polls? Okay, many people have voted already, so we'll just give it a second and wait for the results. All right, if we can display the results and close the poll, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so here are the results. In terms of emerging trends, 17% are seeing focus on board effectiveness, 25% are seeing a focus on board diversity, 9% a focus on ESG compliance, and I see Ms. El-Rufai is smiling and shaking her head. 31% see a focus on digital transformation and digital resilience, 12% see a focus on cybersecurity and enterprise-wide risk management, and 5% see a shift to stakeholder centricity. So I think this is really interesting and hopefully will be a good basis for our discussion this morning. So I would like to start with Ms. El-Rufai, since she's been sort of shaking her head and smiling. And I think we're seeing this sort of global standardization of ESG metrics, right? And we're seeing more and more talk about net zero, about the circular economy, about climate change and the importance of boards, especially and directors, to start really looking at ESG as a driver for strategy. And there are a lot of different reporting metrics that we're seeing. And we believe that we're going to continue to see this ESG trend just get even stronger. So what approach should Nigerian boards take with regards to creating a framework or selecting a framework? And how can they really identify the aspects of ESG that are most material or relevant to their organizations? And how do they set goals for improving on this?
Okay. Very interesting poll outcome. I don't know. I honestly think not everyone truly understands what ESG really is and sustainability and how it will create value. But I'll leave that aside and jump into the question. So let me start off by saying, companies' roles in society, are changing. And, societal demands of companies are changing as well. Because world issues are also becoming companies' issues. You look at population growth, you look at inequality, you look at climate change, COVID-19, pandemic, broken trust, all of which Kerry highlighted nicely in her keynote address. Those are also becoming business issues. We've all seen inequalities, lack of inclusion, they cause social unrest and all that. We're also experiencing it in Nigeria, and then, the demands of stakeholders and stakeholder needs are changing. They're becoming more diverse, from government to regulators, to customers, to suppliers, to employees, and society at large. They all have non-financial expectations. Now financial considerations in reporting and engaging stakeholders is just one side. They demand more strategic, holistic information about that long-term value creation that Kerry mentioned. And, that long-term value creation should also be shared. And that has led to the emergence of non-financial reporting in a clear, relevant, transparent, reliable manner, that would, lead to trusted information, and that's where the audit comes in. So let's go down to now how people go about reporting. Of course, there's so many frameworks. In fact, the CEO of BlackRock called it apple soup. It's like alphabet soup, where there's so many. So the way we've categorized it, you have the umbrella, standards and frameworks like GRI, the integrated reporting, and the SASB that is used mainly by US listed companies. Then you have the single-use standards, frameworks, and measurement protocols, including, the task force on climate-related financial disclosure that is mostly, it's actually a compulsory reporting requirement for London Stock Exchange, companies listed on London Stock Exchange. You have things like the science-based targets, so for example, most of them are focused around climate change and making disclosures around climate change. Then you have, other organizations like the UN with the SDGs. You have, World Economic Forum, that's via the World Business Council of Sustainable Development as well, where they have standards. Then you have ratings, sustainability ratings and ranking, like Sustainalytics. But what we're seeing is, from that quest of convergence, because investors want comparability, they want standardization, they want to be able to compare across countries, across industries and all. So what we're seeing are umbrella enabling initiatives and alliances. You have the Ifrs Foundation that Kerry mentioned. They've done their consultation where we in PwC expect, the first standard to come out this year. We don't know how quickly they'll be able to pull it off. We're trying to see whether they'll focus on climate change, because when you look at their consultation, they actually consulted on that particular question, whether they should start off with climate that's planet, or whether they should try to establish for planet, people, and prosperity. So, you know, we're starting to see that, or UN, you know, have the European Union has, you know, the taxonomy, the CSRD that they have, you know, passed that requires reporting by companies with a threshold based on turnover and staff. So, you know, coming down to Nigeria, you know, of course, there are other reporting standards. We have NGX here. There's the Nigeria Stock Exchange, you know, sustainability disclosure guidelines. For the banks, we have, you know, the Nigeria Sustainability Banking Principles. So, you know, there are just so many. There are just so many. So typically, you know, a board, you know, would be faced with that dilemma of what's most appropriate for them. And, you know, the board should look at the purpose. Generally, you know, a sustainable company should be built or led by purpose. When you look at companies that have been in existence for over 100 years, they're led by purpose, right? So you have to look at your purpose. You have to look at, you know, your intended users and stakeholders. You have to look at their reporting needs. You have to look at, you know, those topics that are material to you as well, you know, when selecting, because you saw how I explained the categorization of the frameworks. You know, if probably a lot of your reporting, like the SASD, you know, is investor-led. You know, it's designed to furnish investors with information, and it's you know, this thing. So another reason why, you know, you want that convergence is because of cherry picking. So, you know, the board has to, you know, choose something that truly would help them manage, you know, their material impact areas, the material topics. Then, of course, you have, you know, the reporting needs of the stakeholders. And I think with that, you know, and you have to look at your reporting boundaries and the impact of the communication. And that way you can choose, you know, a framework that is most appropriate for you. But in practice, what we help clients do is at the beginning, when we are going to develop reports, after mapping the stakeholders, we map the alliances they belong to, the frameworks they want to. You can combine as well, because at the end of the report, you have your index table. So you show how you've confirmed, including SDGs, any industry, sustainability, alliance you belong to. So you can actually, you know, develop one report that meets, but rarely would you, of course, you can combine integrated reporting with a GRI-based sustainability report, but you can combine reporting to UN Global Compact, reporting on your SDG impact or contributions to SDG with GRI. But the most commonly used is GRI, because it prescribes and recommends for a broader, you know, area. Even in Nigeria, that's what's most common, GRI. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was extremely detailed and very helpful. And I'm sure a lot of people will be excited to get the recording after this session so that they can take detailed different standards and frameworks and the recommendations that you've made. One of the things that you mentioned was the different frameworks that we have in Nigeria, and we'll come back to that because I just want to jump to Mr. Shobanjo first. And along the lines of ESG, right, we're seeing that globally investors are really looking at what do I invest in, how sustainable is this business, how ESG compliant is the business, and also the same goes for companies within financial services when it comes to what do they finance, right? So banks are looking more and more at financing only projects and different things that are ESG compliant. Are we seeing this same trend in Nigeria? And sort of tell us what you see, especially in the market, what exactly is happening, and how do you also see this evolving in the future?
Okay, great question. I think in Nigeria, what we're finding is that we are probably still at a relatively, infant stage as far as, ESG is concerned. But I must say that we've started to see a bit of traction over the last few years. As Rukaya mentioned, the exchange came up with the Sustainable Disclosure Guidelines in 2018, which basically made it, a requirement for listed companies to comply with those requirements. I think to date, the companies that are listed on the premium board of the exchange, 100% of those companies are already compliant with those requirements. In other words, they're reporting all of their activities around sustainability. And of course, this includes some large banks and some other types of organizations. If we go back several years, the central bank actually issued guidelines for the banking sector around sustainability. So what that meant was that the banks had an early start, and a lot of those banks, by virtue of regulation, have had to comply with the CBN directives. And that meant that also there are a number of categories in those required, including the areas, the sectors to finance. And so you'll find that a lot of the banks, like I said, have already had a head start and already financing, energy efficient and other types of sustainable areas. In the capital market, we've seen 4 issuances of green bonds over the last couple of years, and we've seen transactions worth over 40 billion naira, to put it in naira and kobo. And I think so. We still have a long way to go. We've seen some traction. We've seen one of the large banks, one of the large corporates, has actually come out to issue a green bond. We've also seen the government, the federal government, also issue green bonds, and that's really financing, areas that are environmentally friendly and things like that. And I think investors, particularly the large institutional investors, those are one of the things, those are one of the benchmarks that they would actually look out for in terms of the types of companies that they would invest in, and in terms of how they measure the performance of those companies as well. So we're seeing, an investor on the buy side, obviously, being that they're actually demanding that. So there's a demand for the buy side. We're also seeing that competition would naturally dictate some of these things. So when you see an issuer going out to raise, green financing like this, then what you will find is that the competition would also take note, and the market will take note generally. And we're starting to see some of those things. So whilst we're still at a very low pace, we expect to see a significant traction over the next few years. I must also add that the Securities and Exchange Commission, just in April this year, has also issued sustainable guidelines for the capital market sector. Now, this also applies, apart from capital market operators, the financial institutions, this also applies to all public companies. So companies that are listed on the exchange and companies that are not listed, to ensure that they take this very seriously in consideration in terms of how they conduct their operations, but also it also compels them. So it's no longer a nice to have. It's actually something that will be compelling as far as the companies are concerned in terms of how the Securities and Exchange will monitor this. So it remains to be seen in terms of how quickly we adapt to this. But I would expect that regulators would continue to be very proactive along this space, because this is obviously something that the market wants, and I would expect to see a lot more development in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So I'll go over to Ms. Lumumba. And while we are on the topic of ESG, part of that is also has to do with social trends and human capital development. And like I mentioned during my introduction, we're really seeing that shift from shareholder centricity to stakeholder centricity, even though the poll told us otherwise. And that was also one of the really low performance numbers that we saw. So how can leaders be empowered to make effective changes that meet the growing demands across the different stakeholders? So this includes employees, investors, customers, shareholders, as well as activists. What can they do to sort of create strategies that help them, maneuver these new waters?
Thank you very much for that very good question. Actually, the poll surprised me because I thought it's a trend that is really picking up, but I picked it, I think, at the lowest percentage from our polling. Let me begin by saying that traditionally companies have been led and they have been, activities have been done with primarily the shareholder in mind, the person that began the company. And the reason that has been the case is because from the beginning, if we look at the way companies were created in the 18th century, really when they came into play, the shareholder and his return were at the center of the activities of the company. But then recently, we have seen the roundtable, the association of the roundtable coming up and making a pronunciation that now, even though the shareholder is a very important person in the company, there are many other people whose activity and interests contribute to the success of the company. And the trend now is for companies to work with the entire group of stakeholders in mind. And so we have to very openly think about the company and place it in place in terms of its activities, its success or failure, and its interests. And when we put the company at the very center of our circle, we realize that there are many other people that surround and contribute to the success of that company. They are the shareholders, granted, who bring in the capital, who most probably appoint the directors and bring many other contributory factors to the company. But then there are the stakeholders. For example, there are the regulators, like my brother from the exchange. There are people from government who license, who make policies to support the success of the company. There are those who supply the company with the materials that it needs to process in order for them to be successful. There are employees who are key to the success of the company. There is, they're the customers, they're the consumers of the product who, if they say we will not consume your product, for sure, however well you work, you are not going to be successful as a company. And so that's why the pronunciation came up and said, rather than the activities of the company be centered for the satisfaction of the shareholders alone, we needed to widen that circle and bring in all the stakeholders. So now to come to your question, and the question was, what should a company do in order for them to factor the now coming in trend that stakeholders are important? Number one, they have to be aware on who those stakeholders are. In corporate governance, we say that each company must map its stakeholders. They must put in place which stakeholder plays what role where. Then they have to come up with the interests. What I have seen is that very successful companies have now moved to the second level and asked themselves, what is the interest of the government in my business? And how do I take care of it? They have asked themselves, what is the interest of my employees in my business? And how do I take care of it? So apart from mapping them, being very aware of them, they must be aware of the interests. And if those interests are not satisfied, how does that affect the products and the success of the company, for instance. For instance, if you don't satisfy the governmental requirement, your license could be denied. And if your license is denied, it means your company won't operate. And if your company is not operating, it means you seriously will not be successful, or there will be such big sanctions on you that your profitability may be eroded. I mean, if you live in a jurisdiction like where I live, I have seen many of that happening. Now, the third thing that companies are advised to do under corporate governance is to engage the stakeholder proactively. Companies now, I have seen companies that are successful going ahead and asking themselves, so how is the government thinking in terms of tax? We have tax, and in the African continent, for example, tax is a big thing. Governments are waking up every day, and the people in the tax authorities are dreaming every day on how to get your money. So as a proactive company or group of companies or a community of companies, you should think, so how is the government thinking in terms of tax? For example, how do I satisfy the needs of the government? What about security? What about my cyber security, for example, as a company? How do I deal with all the people that are interested in the fact that I should be successful as a company? Quick resolution to stakeholder issues is another a trend that I have seen. My employer, the IFC, sent me to evaluate a company in a certain country I will not mention, which had serious issues with stakeholders. And when I arrived there, the company is an agricultural company. When I arrived there, I found out that one bright morning, stakeholders marched to the company operations and they simply shut it up. And the reason they shut is because the greatest resource around that area was water. The local community for a long time had used their water to do their little farming activities. And then this big investor went up the river and shut the water for his own irrigation. And obviously the stakeholders were not happy. So quick stakeholder resolution issues is a trend that I have seen, and that is really a must for any company to be successful in its activities. The other trend I have seen is that we as companies, and when I read through the introductions, I saw that many people are from the private sector and they work for companies. When businesses are established in a community, a company must evaluate the community expectations. Many communities in Africa and in the continent, because I work in the sub-Saharan Africa, have got very high expectations. When, let's say, a company establishes its mining or its soda production or whatever it is in the community, the list is endless in terms of the community expectations, from education to health to employment to just being treated nicely, etc. Both monetary and non-monetary expectations are there. So the trend I have seen for successful companies is that they must be very aware of those expectations, and they must make every effort to meet those expectations. Community engagement on an ongoing basis is really important for any company to succeed. To give information to the company, this is what we are doing, this is how we are doing it, this is how it will affect you, this is how it will benefit you, and also for the companies to get, the vibes back from the community. What is the community thinking? How acceptable is our business to that community? How can we improve the relations? What about employing their people? Have we been tilted to this direction or the other? So really, companies are now being required to be very aware of all those stakeholder interests and have strategies to ensure that the stakeholder interests are, number one, governed well, number two, at the very highest, met. Yeah, so if you meet all those, then you will be having the stakeholder at the center. Certainly a very important question. Thank you for asking it. I hope I've shed some light on the question that you asked. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I think very, very interesting insights that you've shared. And I love the examples that you've also brought, because I think that just also brings the, African reality that, companies here in Nigeria face on a day-to-day into into light and into consideration as well. So as I had said, we're going to come back to ESG and we're going to come back to the regulations. And I've seen the chat is abuzz with questions around these regulations. So I'm going to merge my question with the questions in the chat. So my question is, so Ms. El-Rufai, what is your assessment of the maturity of local ESG regulations or guidelines like the CBN Sustainability Banking Principles, NSE Sustainable Disclosure, the FRCN Code for Corporate Conduct, etc.? And how would you like to see them evolve? And as a second part to that question, also, is there some level of, or is there a possibility for convergence, right? So that they can be brought together into one framework. And then another question is, how do small companies sort of engage with these frameworks, right? So a lot of the time, small businesses have very different struggles than big businesses. They can't hire an ESG specialist or consultant like PwC. So how do they, sort of engage with these frameworks and navigate these frameworks, and which ones should they select? So I know many questions, but
certainly a lot, but very interesting questions. So I honestly think, the issues with the regulations is enforcement. There's so many. In fact, when I saw the poll, I was thinking, probably we're not enforcing regulations, because when you look at the regulations, I have a list here in front of me, so I'll be turning a bit. From the Constitution, Nigerian Constitution, there is, the state is empowered to improve the environment, safeguard water, air, land, forest, wildlife. So you move down, there's Environmental Impact Act, We move down, there's National Policy on the Environment, there's Policy on Climate Change, there is Oil in Navigable Waters, there is, the Water Resources Act, there's so many harmful waste, solid waste and human waste, down to gas flaring and all that. So when you look at even with consumer markets, with the plastic menace, there's the EPR, the End Life Producer Response. So there are the regulations. So it's really about enforcing them. And I think that's what's translating into, the maturity. But there are some really forward-looking companies that realize, if they act on these, it would actually a lower risk, lower costs, improve their brand equity, and there's so many that see access to cheap cost of capital. Now, even if foreign investors are coming in, they often do ESG due diligence, so you quite have this thing. CBN, to talk about the Nigeria Sustainability Banking Principle, it was passed 8 years ago, and it has actually put, when you look at Nigerian banks, they are reporting most of them, and a lot of them even assure their reports. When you look at the rankings of sustainable banking principles, actually Nigeria is put at the forefront for emerging markets, even ahead of South Africa. Ghana just did theirs last year. So you see the maturity. In some sectors is more, in some sectors it isn't. The Nigeria sustainability guidelines, I remember we were receiving proposals when you guys passed it, and when you now restricted the enforcement to premium listed companies, many people were pulling out. So I remember even going to have a chat. I think the span of compliance, the scope, the companies, I think it should be enforced to all listed companies because of the ESG fitness of these companies, because many people will realize late, the cost of inaction, so to even help. So regulations need to be enforced more, and it needs to listen. So that's on the distance. So the evolution, I expect it to be fast. We're seeing it already. It's honestly happening at an accelerated pace, you know. Then convergence, typically when you look at what happens, there's a global standard that is passed. Normally regulators adopt it when you look at IFRS, you know, and all that. So I expect when the Ifrs Foundation passes something, the standard, I think Nigeria would embrace it, and it would help converge and create this. But I mean, the stock exchange has embraced the GPS ESG rating. So I remember speaking at that launch. So there is that rating, which is good. We were all excited, where you know, you can see how you're performing versus your peers among common ESG indicators, and they pick the data, including unstructured data like public sentiments and all. It's by a company called Risk Insight. Then in terms of small companies, you know, I forgot even at the beginning, I didn't answer that process of materiality. It's not cumbersome. A small company can adopt GRI and produce a sustainability report. It's simple, to be honest, because all you need to do is you do your materiality assessment and you engage stakeholders, you know. So because, like they said, the double materiality is meant to combine the enterprise value, the impact on financials, and then the societal value. So it's that intersection. And the way you practically achieve that is you do your materiality workshops. Normally, you have an internal workshop with the internal stakeholders, and you have one with your external stakeholders. So they also have a say in what's relevant and most important. So those ESG areas and topics, they also have a say, and you concentrate on the intersection of both, what emerges very high for both. So it's a simple process. You do the materiality, you now have your topics. GRI prescribes how to report on those areas. If it's carbon emissions, if it's water resource use, if it's tax contributions, you know, all that. So it has a way to prescribe. So it's very simple, prescriptive, open. The resources are open. But what I've noticed is, you know, many companies don't invest in their ESG data. So when you come, you often stumble, you know, when you're trying to report, because people report, they don't even have the strategies yet, because you're meant to create the strategy based on your material risks and opportunities, your issues and your risks, you know, and you're meant to embed it in your strategy, in your operating model, your operations, in your governance systems, in your performance tracking systems. Now you even have executive pay linked to some ESG indicators, you know. So by the time you do that, the strategy ends with your KPIs. So you now, you know, you have your target, and at year end, you're meant to report transparently in a balanced way how you've met those targets or not. So I honestly think small companies, is in their interest as well to do it, because, you know, you earn that social license to operate. You have a more robust risk management and all that, just that it might be at a smaller scale. Yeah, thank you.
I think that answers a lot of the questions that we've been seeing in the chat. And I think a lot of people also have agreed with what you've said. One of the other areas that we saw in the poll was focused on digital transformation and sort of the role of cybersecurity. And for that, we'd like to pull up a second poll that, you know, sort of focuses on what the biggest challenges of boards are after 2020 and 2021's rapid transition to digital operations. I think the last 18 months have really, you know, shown a lot of interesting times. And we've seen that sort of digital transformation is no longer that abstract term or some kind of buzzword of the future. It's become a critical component to every corporate strategy. So I think the poll will be very interesting to sort of see the results of what people are thinking with regards to the biggest challenges for digital transformation and the transition to digital operations. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll look at the results. All right, I think we can display the results now, please. Okay, so 30% think that adapting to more agile corporate governance strategies is the biggest challenge. 6% say having board savvy directors, which surprises me. 16% say real-time reporting and achieving data-driven decision-making. 12% say upskilling employees, and 35% say digital strategy development. Okay, and then 1% say other. So I think this is a really very interesting result and a little bit unexpected, I find. So I'd like to ask Mr. Shobanjo what trends he sees in boardrooms of listed companies with regards to digital transformation and digital resilience, and how does traditional corporate governance, both within organizations and from sort of the regulator standpoint, have to adopt to align with these agile and accelerated new business environments?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question. I think that the digital transformation is actually something that has become a necessity. I think if we go back to 2020, a lot of companies probably had it as one of their top priority areas, but when the COVID pandemic lockdown was initiated, what we found was a lot of companies were forced to accelerate their digital transformation strategy. I'll give you a few examples. So in the first instance, in the lockdown, there was obviously no movement. People couldn't move around as freely as they would have normally. And what that meant is, in terms of business as usual, even how to continue to conduct their businesses, how to conduct things like their annual general meetings, how to conduct their regulatory filings, and the normal business as usual operations, everything had to become digital. And so what we found was the regulators had to get together very quickly to initiate a new set of regulation to enable companies conduct their meetings virtually, and obviously voting via proxies and things like that. We had to engage very quickly with the CAC to issue out very quick guidelines to govern that process. Fortunately for us at the exchange, we had embarked on our digital strategy, transformation strategy a few years earlier. And so filing of regulatory reporting was already done by ex officio, so companies could stay from their offices or from their homes and issue out these reports. So what that, to your question, what this has done is it has really put at the forefront the need for digital transformation. I mean, that is something that can no longer be ignored. I think that most companies now, if you go around and ask in terms of what their priority is, I think that would be one of the main things. And it's interesting that the poll has suggested that it's a major challenge that people are going to have to deal with, because a lot of it is obviously heavy on the tech, on technology, infrastructure, and all of those types of things. I also should note that because we are operating within the construct of the fourth industrial revolution, which is really the digital age, a lot of companies, continue to invest in technologies in different types of technologies to enable them move, as you've said, in a very agile manner, to be able to enhance their customer experience, to be able to engage with their regulators, to conduct their businesses in a way that you just wouldn't have known a few years ago. So I think most certainly, without question, this is obviously one of the biggest topics. And like I said, the pandemic has just basically exposed and accelerated the need to continue to invest in digitization and to continue to be agile and to for companies to continue to adapt in this manner. I hope I've answered the question. I think there must have been a second part that I missed out. I wasn't quite.
Okay, let me just go back to the question quickly. Yeah, so it was basically the trends in the boardrooms and how traditional corporate governance has to adapt. So I think you've actually answered the question fully. I would like to just ask a quick follow-up to that, right? So boards globally are beginning to really view processes like data management and cybersecurity and collaboration more holistically. What shifts or changes are you also seeing in the operations of corporate governance practices? So you've already alluded to some of them in terms of, sort of everything going digital. But what are the strategies of listed Nigerian companies, and what role does big data, access to real-time data and data analytics play in the Nigerian boardroom today?
I think it's huge. Big data analytics is obviously, they say data is the new oil, as it were. It's obviously something that every organization is looking to see how they can use just to enhance their business processes, access to how they serve their customers. Because with big data, what that enables you to do is, to see how what the trends, how your customers are reacting, and how you can serve them better. And I think that the companies that are able to adapt and mine the data and use that data more intelligently are obviously able to be more customer-centric and be able to serve their customers more effectively. Around the exchange, I must say that the exchange's role around corporate governance is one of a disclosure regime. So it's pretty much about just for companies to just be transparent and to disclose some of their key activities. But what I must say is that the companies that have the highest or that subscribe to the highest set of corporate governance are always rewarded by the market. So in other words, investors would, are very appreciative. And you see that in the share price. It's always reflected back in the share price. So the company that subscribes to these new trends or these ways of corporate governance, the highest standards, would always be rewarded by customers. And those companies are obviously more sustainable than their peers. So that's another way to look at it. But most certainly, big data, even at the exchange, is something that we continue to invest in. We continue to look at how we can extract data, how we can serve the millions of customers, both local and foreign, that we serve, how we can serve them better, how we can provide better products and services to them. And I believe that it's the same way that most of the companies that are listed on the exchange also continue to look after their customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And you alluded to something that's really, really critical, right? So the digitally savvy boards usually outperform others significantly. And there's some really critical metrics that sort of measure that. And one of them is revenue growth, return on assets, and market cap growth, right? And I think that there we're really sort of seeing that as a board, you have to have digitally savvy board members that are ready to ask those really hard questions and that really understand what is digital strategy all about. So Ms. Lumumba, I would like to ask you, you do a lot of board evaluations and board trainings. And I was really surprised that only 6% of respondents thought that digitally savvy board members were a challenge. I honestly thought that number would be higher. So I want to know from you, what are the trends that you're seeing, and what criteria should boards use to identify these technology savvy directors, and how can they also upskill the rest of the board to make sure that it's not just one person sort of directing digital, because that can also be extremely dangerous, right? You need every director, to really understand what role does digital play and how does digital strategy drive business, because digital has become a strategic driver for businesses, as we've seen, and as Mr. Shobanjo has also alluded to. So what should boards do, and what are you seeing just in general?
So a very important question. And of course, again, let me retaliate what you have said, that the poll surprised me because prior to the pandemic, for sure, digital issues were something you could have if you could afford it. Because people went to the office, they worked face to face, they supplied, they got their data, they got their raw materials, and they recorded even in hand. And now come in the pandemic, which throws the board into a space that the board had not, many boards across Africa actually, including many organizations like the one I work for, had not anticipated. Nobody saw this coming. And we lived our life very comfortably. We were assured of the spaces that we had, that we could work in. And so this pandemic and the growth and the developments that we have had for nearly 2 years now, not only affirmed the important role of the board as the highest organ within companies and organizations that really made decisions for moving the company forward. And that role was challenged. All of a sudden, companies could not meet on an ongoing basis. I remember speaking with my clients in Ethiopia and trying to get people to even give me information, and they could not access what they had in the office, and in many other countries across the sub-Saharan Africa. And so the trend we saw is that companies that had invested in the digital space and in innovation quickly got onto their feet and they moved on. They quickly held their meetings. They could access online servers and storage of information, and quickly continue with their work as they had planned it. We also saw a trend where companies that had not invested in the digital space, that were not innovating, that were not online, for example, that did not store all their information, their data online at all, really struggled to go back to the hard copies of the information and keep their business moving forward, including simple things like addresses that were people copied from the file and simply put onto, and maybe wrote out orders, etc., with their hands. And so I also saw a trend where people needed, or boards got together and quickly looked at their business strategies and changed them or affirmed them, or simply went on to get strategies for improving them. And so it is important now, as we have been taught, that boards and management, the whole organization, must be digitally savvy. That one is, there's no going back, because I don't think we will ever go back to what we had. I have seen companies give up their rental space because they have realized that people can deliver from their houses. I have worked from my house where I am right now for the past 2 years, and I've been able to work across the sub-Saharan region and in many other places without going to the client's site. And so what can boards do or companies do to catch up on that space? I have seen companies train their board members call upon the companies and the top management to provide to make budgetary provisions to ensure that that is an agenda now in the board, that is something budgeted for in the company, and there is investment and innovation around that. People quickly learned how to use Zoom for meetings, for example. I saw because I also support governments in policy, I saw many of the parastatals or state-owned enterprises that were a little behind, not being able to quickly catch up. But I also saw blue chips. I saw banks and other big organizations and corporations quickly get onto their feet and run along. And so even though we think that it is not a current trend, yet it is, even for us as management. For those of us who worked a little bit from home, you saw the changes that you had to make. For example, here in Kenya, power is intermittent, and I worked in the Nigerian market for a little while. I know that power was also intermittent. What did we need to do? We needed to come up with inverters and other power supporting gadgets to help us be in meetings for a long time without interruption. And so it is not a question on when, it is not a question on how, but it's a question of it is the trend now, and any company that needs to survive, that wants to be top of the class in terms of its performance, really must embrace that. Companies that are now taking in directors, they're asking the director, are you digitally savvy? Can you use a computer? Can you log in into a meeting? Can you use any of these gadgets that we have? And I have seen companies that quickly taking their directors into training, including the security of the information, cyber security, when board papers are being sent online, where should you open them? How should you open them? How do you protect that data of the organization so that you don't expose the organization to a cyber attack? So that is the trend, and companies can actually catch up. People are now, I know many companies that are totally working from home. They've said we don't need those big offices that we hired before, especially people in the service space that don't need to meet on an ongoing basis. And so it's something that has caught up with us. Let us embrace it as businesses and really be top of the class in terms of that innovation. It will come in handy. I don't know what the next crisis will be, but my guess is that it will be around the financial sector. I attended a training the other day on cybersecurity, and I saw the developments, and any company must know what people are planning against them every day. Now that people learned that people are working online, there is a big exposure to companies and businesses in terms of their data. And I think that we really ought to be very aware of the risk that there is and have strategies to ensure that that risk does not crystallize on us. I hope it doesn't happen, but I see it as a reality. And this is Rose speaking, it's not IFC. I see it as something that we really should be careful about. Because now, you know, robbery before, when I grew up, I used to hear where I lived in here in Nairobi, that all robbers went and they were in masks and they robbed a bank, they tied up the watchman, etc. It's no longer the trend. The trend is now online. And much as we are innovating as a company, we must also know that the people who are targeting us are even more innovative. They wear smarter suits and than what we are wearing here, those of us who can see, and they sit in places and plan against companies in terms of attacks. So we really, even as we innovate, we make our directors savvy. Most directors, depending on age and exposure, they may be people who may not be very aware of that cybersecurity. So we must make them aware and protect ourselves from those.
everybody has heard that they just need to get themselves ready. And while we are on the subject of boards and sort of the board composition, where the different types of skill levels are really important, we're also seeing that more and more boards are taking gender diversity seriously. And what does that landscape look like here in Nigeria and across the continent? What trends are you seeing, Ms. Lumumba? And why is this board diversity so important? And how can also technology help drive board readiness for African women so that they can also be able to connect qualified candidates with boards who are seeking out female members? And if you could please keep your answer really brief, because we've actually run out of time, and I'm doing a very bad job at time management here, but I think the discussion has been extremely interesting. And I would still like to sort of take one question for each person from the audience as well before we round up. So if you can just maybe keep it to a minute, and then we can take questions from the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So gender diversity is one of those diversities that I am seeing organizations take up to ensure that they have got female representation on the board and at top management. So I had I have lots of data, but I will not go into it. But all I can say is that boards that are diversified in terms of gender perform better. There have been numerous studies. We actually had the first study around 2002. Some after the crisis in 2008, we saw numerous coming up and saying that boards that had women in their membership actually did well. Quickly moving to Nigeria. The Nigerian experience on gender diversity, I think, began after the UN, and actually for the entire sub-Saharan Africa. After the UN announced the International Women's Day in 1975, that's when we saw people in Africa beginning to recognize and appreciate that women can bring leadership and quality and work to the table. And reading the trend in your country from the political pronouncement that was done in 1999 in the amendment to your constitution to ensure that women are embraced in terms of leadership, to the Securities Exchange, also requiring that there be diversity in boards. I think we have seen somewhat good baby steps made, but there is room, lots of room for development in terms of embracing the women leadership. My personal view is that as long as a woman is qualified, she should be given an equitable chance to compete for any position, just like any other person. I don't advocate for favoritism, that a woman should be favored just because she's a woman, but I think women bring a lot to the table. In my CV that you read, one of the things that I suffered I noted as a regulator in the capital markets was that listed companies did not have enough women. Maybe one had one and majority had none. And every time I asked the chairpersons of those companies, why don't you have women on your board? They kept on saying, I don't know where to find the women. So one of the things that I did together with 3 of my friends was to begin the Women on Boards Network, where I build capacity for women on leadership and make them ready for picking and appointing into the boards. We have begun another one in Sierra Leone, and I believe working on one in Ethiopia, just to ensure that we have that diversity, because I know the benefits of diversity. So the Nigerian market is moving in the right direction, not at the pace that we would all like. However, since we have recognized the benefit of women being in boards, I believe that more and more will move forward. Actually, from my observation, the Nigerian market has got some of the highest educated women. So anybody wishing to appoint a woman to their board, they will not lack. I have met nearly the most educated women when I came to Lagos and Abuja to work. I mean, I'm really totally impressed myself as a person who works in that market. Let me stop there in the interest of time. I would say a lot. Yes.
Thank you so much. Maybe you can share some of those resources and statistics that you have so that we can also send that on to the audience. I think everybody would be really interested, and I think it would also benefit everyone to really just understand the benefits of diversity. And how they can also attract board-ready female board members to their boards. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. So I will start with Ms. El Rufai. So this is a question from a company operating in the oil and gas sector. And they are saying, how would companies operating in the oil and gas sector cope with the barrage of these emerging trends in governance, given the current realities to stiff competition and reduced access to funding for fossil fuels by financial institutions, right? And that's something that we talked about. So what are your thoughts on a simple to apply strategy that these companies can adopt, especially for marginal field operators, if you have any specific information on that? But I think just in general, how do companies with, you know, somewhat non-ESG compliant business models, how do they adapt, and what happens to them in the future?
They have no option, honestly, but to re-strategize, to go back, you know, and think of the future of energy sector. It's definitely one of the sectors that would be at the center of decarbonization, in addition to transport and so on. So what I would suggest, because there's a case study of a coal mining company in South Africa. And I remember I attended an event and the CEO was presenting their case on what they're doing. So when you look at the energy sector and the whole transition, which of course access to capital is one of the things affecting them, you know, there is just transition. And when you look at the future of oil in Africa, you can say in the medium term, you can still see us, you know, using fossil fuels. So there is still some of that demand. So what that company is doing is running two models. One business model to continue to meet the immediate and the medium term needs, you know, and then they have a new business model around renewable energy. And, you know, one of the things they need to do, like Kerry mentioned, is they need to have their transition strategy. You know, their whether carbon neutrality or this thing, you know. So there is, you know, I think any smart company in fossil fuel would try to come up with a transition plan to a better business model, but they have to do a proper strategy, look at, you know, the disruption scenario that they should expect and develop a transition plan. And, you know, they need to, that's why when I saw the Petroleum Industry Act, I honestly didn't see, you know, that transition come out well, probably because the bill was in the pipeline for some time. But I mean, there's no choice but to start diversifying, you know, and coming up with a new business model. Yeah, but I think there should still be some investors out there that would be interested in funding for the short term, because I remember that CEO mentioning they had to satisfy those investors and then, you know, try to future-proof their company, investing in digital systems and in, you know, a renewable energy business model. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have a couple of questions around stakeholder engagement for Ms. Lumumba. So, you know, you had spoken about stakeholder engagement, and I think some people wanted to know how does the stakeholder engagement and the stakeholder centricity that we talked about, how does it differ from the usual stakeholder management that every company should be engaging with? And the second question is around stakeholder engagement is always important to the success of companies. What do you think of the government way of doing business in Nigeria? So I think this is basically about the public sector and what role they also play when it comes to stakeholder engagement. So if you could speak to those quickly, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me begin with the first one where I believe the person asking is asking how different is it? I think the major difference is that now it is being done very intentionally. And the same effort that was made to satisfy the shareholder need is now being applied, or it's being spread around to ensure that all the stakeholders are treated not with equality, but with them in mind. As the business strategy is being developed, you're thinking about every stakeholder and what their need is. Previously, it's the shareholder that we really just spoke about and said, the shareholder has given us his capital, so he needs a return. Now everybody has a return. So the companies I am seeing are engaging stakeholders well is asking, so what is that return? What return does the government want? What return do employees want? What return do suppliers want, etc. And if we don't give that return, how will that affect us? In this digital savvy world, I saw a bank nearly shut down by stakeholders called account holders. One time, somebody went to the bank and they were not treated well, and they began on Twitter tweeting on their experience at the bank. In 2 days' time, there were people, taking off their accounts to other banks and nearly taking the bank on a run. So the question now is, for the bank, what role do our bank account holders play? How important is it? How successful will be our treatment to them? I mean, how will it affect our success, how we treat them? That one person who walks into the banking hall and is not happy, what can they do? So the dynamics have changed. Especially with the way information and data is now moving around. And so companies now need to embrace that and ensure that they satisfy the stakeholder needs, whoever it is, even the government. However mundane it looks like, their need is once they give you a license, you go away. Now governments are taking it a notch higher and wondering what you're doing and wanting to look at your report. And just to add a little bit on the sustainability report, which we've been talking about, it is actually telling your story yourself. If you don't tell that story, somebody is going to tell your story for you. And you can believe when somebody tells your story for you, they will emphasize areas that you don't want emphasized, and they will bring down areas that you thought you had done so well. So it's something that I have seen being embraced, and we really must embrace around. Doing business for government. I have a Rose opinion and an IFC opinion. So let's talk about the IFC opinion. Governments are important, and they really do what? They really are there. And if you look at the genesis of how government began providing services for those of us who lived, whose countries were under the colonization, and after that left, government set up businesses to fill that gap. I don't know if they have what it takes to actually run those enterprises and provide those services, because many companies in Africa, you have governments providing power, governments providing water, governments providing many services which are there. And so for that to be successful, they need to embrace all these principles we have spoken about here today, so that they can actually, function like any other private company, in order for them to also have their stakeholders and the success. You can imagine if the government thought about what do the power consumers in Nigeria need, and they think about you as they're developing their strategy and actually fulfill it. It would be a beautiful thing that will come up. What do the tax holders want, for example? Yeah, how people, the taxpayers, what do they want? If the strategy will be created around that, we would have a totally different different way of dealing with things. Yeah, so yes, these principles are here, and anybody who needs to be successful, you really must embrace it. Otherwise, you will be working from a very misinformed position, and it will actually affect your success. And if you practically look around, you will see that people who have embraced, they move ahead very well, either in the provision of service or products or goods. And those who haven't, we have the results just before our eyes.
Thank you so much. There's one more question for you, which is about the platform for board-ready African women. If you could just maybe put some details in the chat for everyone to see what the name of the platform is, and I guess also how women can be part of that platform. So moving on to Mr. Shobanjo, there's one question here about the disparities between corporate governance in the private and public sector, and how can we sort of begin to balance those out? What is your take on that?
I think that's a very tricky question. Well, look, I think when the National Code of Corporate Governance came out a few years ago, one of the things that it tried to do in Nigeria was to perhaps address some of the public sector governance issues as well. It's not that we don't have, I must say very clearly, it's not that we don't have the regulations or the codes and things to subscribe to. I just believe that it's sort of in the implementation and sort of in the enforcement as well. So the private sector obviously has to be, just by way of the way it's set up, it's more efficient and tends to run with perhaps more effective monitoring and measurement. On the government side, on the public sector side, I think that it's come from years of I'm looking for the best language to use now, but I would say that it has come a long way in terms of trying to see improvement. And I think that with the right level of push and with the right level of leadership and support, and with perhaps the private sector also putting more, perhaps being more vocal and perhaps being more aware of what their rights are, I think that we can perhaps start to see some of the gaps closing, between the private sector and the public sector. But we're on the right track in terms of the regulations and the codes that we're seeing. Like I said, the Code of Corporate Governance is actually there. It's come out a few years ago. And it's really around implementation and ensuring that there's an effective oversight from the political system to ensure that the public sector can also bridge that gap. I think trying to be diplomatic, that's as best and as succinctly that I can put it. It's a major problem. It's there. We all know that it's there. But I think that we've come a very long way towards closing that.
I think that was a very good, diplomatic answer. Thank you so much for that. So in closing, I would like to ask all the panelists to sort of, in one sentence, tell me and tell the audience, given the current socioeconomic environment of business in Nigeria, and also the theme of this conference, where we discuss the emerging trends in corporate governance, Which of the modern corporate governance practices will drive resilience, growth, and success in Nigerian organizations? And what other parting words of advice may you have for the audience? Please, as short as possible, 1 or 2 sentences. Thank you.
All of them, as we have been polling and talking about, is very important. But apart from being aware of them, you really have to have a strategy to deal with them. That's it.
All right, thank you. So we'll go over to Mr. Shobanjo, and then we'll go to Ms. El-Rufai.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay. Question is basically, given the current socioeconomic environment of business in Nigeria and the theme of this conference, which modern corporate governance practices will drive resilience, growth, and success in the Nigerian organizations that are in the market today? And if you have any other advice for the audience, you can add that to it as well. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've spoken a lot about ESG. We've spoken a lot about digital transformation strategies and cyber resilience. I think we're operating in the 4th industrial revolution. I said that before. I think that the digital transformation is here to stay. I think that what we've mentioned is that cyber security and cyber resilience is something that also has to be embedded. The pandemic has also opened up new vistas in terms of business continuity. How prepared are you for the next where is the next pandemic? Where is the next disaster going to come from? How prepared is your business? And so those are some of the things that I would put as at the front burner in terms of how businesses should prepare, in terms of business continuity of preparations, and just being able to adapt in the new digital age. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. El-Rufai?
Okay, in terms of, the right corporate governance practices, I believe this Icgm Principles that was presented to us is quite robust and kind of captures, all the issues faced. Like I said at the beginning, societal issues have now become business issues. We're all in it together, both private and public sector. So, the advice is, all companies should have a purpose. They should be led by purpose, right? Integrate, ESG, because it really is about, creating long-term value that is shared. And, a big part of it is your risk management. It should be integrated from your strategy to your execution to your reporting, and, of course, you have to look inwards and outwards in your value creation. So you're looking at the enterprise value, you're looking at the societal value in an inclusive manner through the stakeholder engagement that Rose has said a lot about, if I may call you Rose. Then, of course, upskilling and building capacity. A lot of reasons why people are not tech savvy, because they're scared, they're not upskilled. So upskilling is so critical. Whatever new and daring shift you're going to do, you have to upskill. On ESG as well, you have to upskill. If not, all your initiatives, since you're trying to do it through integrated acting as well, you have to create awareness, and then you have to, invest in ESG as well. Because I truly believe that ESG, it also looks at those tech, and all that, because it's about, having that scan and long time horizon, and you have to invest in data, because a lot of times, so you're guided by data. And that's it from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I think everyone will agree that this has been a really robust and very interesting and insightful panel discussion. And with that, I would like to thank my 3 panelists. Thank you so much for making out the time. Apologies for taking 10 extra minutes, but I think your knowledge about the really broad theme of corporate governance and the new trends is so deep that we could have probably spoken a couple of more hours about this. So thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing so generously. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand back over to Mrs. Modi to introduce the book presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bego, and thank you to our panelists. Indeed, a very insightful discussion. A lot have been said about stakeholder engagements, the need for quick resolution, evaluation of stakeholders' expectations, improved regulation on ESG, harmonization of ESG framework and the code. You know, my notes is actually very full, and all that, cyber risk and security. So much, you know, so much to ponder on. I would like to say a very big thank you to you and also the panelists. Not to take so much of our time, the next on the agenda is a presentation of books, two of our publication. And to do this, I would like to call on our directors, Professor Fabian Icgn, to present the first book, and pass on to Mr. Tijani Borodo to present the second book to the public. Professor Ajogu, if you're ready, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Modi and panelists for today. I think I've been sucked into listening to the panel discussions, and I'm only trying to get myself back to doing the task for which I'm very happy to do, and that is the presentation of corporate governance and sustainability reporting in Nigeria. This is the 8th edition of this publication, the 2021 edition, and it covers broadly the issues of corporate governance reporting and sustainability reporting as well. Permit me to not just wave the book on the screen, but just to say one or two things, perhaps to whet your appetite to what this book really offers. And you can then look forward to reading for yourself. So it does cover a list of 30 most capitalized companies on the exchange. And the choice of that selection was not just to deal with the big club, but was to deal qualitatively with the bulk of the market in terms of what reporting is. You would remember that when one of the panelists, Sapopola, spoke, talked about the market rewarding good corporate governance practices in terms of either your share price or patronage or so. And that is so true from what we see appear through the report. Forward to this edition was written by Ms. Tinu Ade-Awe, the CEO of the Nigerian Exchange Regulation Limited. And support for the publication has come largely from the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Dangote Group, Zenith Bank PLC, and 11 PLC. So there was a very interesting introduction by PwC's team, Zainab Yunusa, Ms. El Rufai, panelists, in the introductory article put in the book, divided into 3 parts. The first part deals with ESG, which is really the crux of the sustainability reporting that is expected. And we had a contributory article from PwC. And then it does recommend the need for executives and non-execs to think long-term and purposefully drive their companies on the path of sustainability by looking at the triple bottom line of people, planet, and prosperity. It gets some more details in that write-up. Part B of the book, the report, talks about the reporting structure of the top 30 most capitalized companies, the exchange, and concludes with very useful observations and recommendations which boards can take on for their strategy planning for the next year. So it does look at the SEC code, and of course 2011 and the National Code of Corporate Governance, and dealt extensively with some of the disclosures on sustainability and the requirements of the code. The third part, part C, is very interesting. It's a pictorial analysis of the featured company's compliance on sustainability reporting in line with the National Code and the Sustainability Disclosure Guidelines issued by the Nigerian Exchange Limited, and concludes with a sectoral analysis of the 30 companies in the industries they played. Now, you'd find a lot of interesting things in that report. It does talk about, present some useful data. 21 of the 30 featured companies observed growth in their market capitalization despite the pandemic. You may want to argue whether it's nominal growth or real, when you factor in the purchasing power of the Naira, but then it does deal with it on a nominal basis. 8 suffered decline, 8 of the companies, and 1 experienced no change at all. You might find that very interesting. The publication, as you would expect, would go for a token fee, and I think it's been advised on the screen already. But then you look at a publication that essentially covers 30+ trillion Naira of the entire exchange and the market capitalization. I would pause here and withhold part of my excitement for this wonderful publication by the Society for Corporate Governance and do strictly what I've been asked to do, which is to present, and I hereby present the book, the report, Corporate Governance and Sustainability Reporting in Nigeria, a review of the 30 most capitalized companies on the Nigerian exchange for 2021. I'd like to congratulate the chairman, the board, the president of the society, fellows of the society, and members, and all conference attendees for this work of excellence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fabian Ajugwesian. I would then like to move on to Mr. Tijani Borodo to do us the honors in presenting the second publication. Mr. Borodo, if you're ready, over to you, sir. The second publication.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. The chairman of this occasion and who is the president of society, MK Ahmed OON, distinguished colleagues and members of the board of the Society for Corporate Governance, esteemed members of society, fellows and members, the panelists of the discussions we have just had, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly an honor today to welcome you all to this ceremony that marks the publication of the survey report on corporate governance and board structure in the Nigerian agricultural sector by the Society for Corporate Governance in collaboration with Ifrs Foundation and supported by the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered here today, not just as professionals, but as key players and promoters of good corporate governance, ethics, and best practices in Nigeria. However, today happens to be a remarkable one because of the 2 big events taking place concurrently. That is the 2021 Annual Corporate Governance Conference and public presentation of 2 notable publications of the Society for Corporate Governance. Buoyed by these facts, the Management Society for Corporate Governance has ensured that the annual corporate governance publications are now ready and available. The first publication has just been presented, titled Corporate Governance Sustainability Reporting, a review of top 30 most capitalized companies on the Nigerian Exchange 2021. That has just been presented by the learned Professor Fabian Ajogu, and he has done justice to that. While what I'm doing now is present the report that is on survey on board structure and corporate governance in the Nigerian agricultural sector 2021. This publication is an output of a baseline survey on corporate governance for the Nigerian agricultural sector, which covers the study of practice of corporate governance by agricultural companies in Nigeria, carried out by Society for Corporate Governance in partnership with Ifrs Foundation and with the active support of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. This report is based on responses from the structured questionnaire distributed selected agribusinesses owners, covering geopolitical structures of Nigeria, face-to-face interviews, and focus group discussions by the society in collaboration with Ifrs Foundation and supported by the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. We must acknowledge the Commissioner of Agriculture, Lagos State, Ms. Abisola Olusonya, who participated at the validation workshop to review the report and graciously wrote the foreword for the report. We thank you for this. Also, I acknowledge the various agricultural associations, organizations, and agri-practitioners covered during the primary research phase of questionnaire administration, and the industry experts who participated in the survey focus group discussions and who provided their valuable perspectives that contributed to the success of the project. The detailed discussions with these highly experienced individuals provided critical insight into the governance practices adopted by their institution. I must acknowledge the Board of Society for Corporate Governance for their leadership role, and particularly the President and Chairman of the Board, M.K. Ahmad. My humble self, Director Society for Corporate Governance, for providing valuable advisory support throughout the project. We must also appreciate the Ifrs Foundation team, led by Ladi Akoni, CEO, country, Dr. Kenneth Achu, legal, long-term expert, Dorothy Overberg, long-term expert, Samson Fajure, monitoring, evaluation, and compliance specialist, and the former agri-industry coordinator, Professor Olami Kri, for their invaluable guidance. Of course, Dr. Nelson Moka of the Corporate Governance Directorate Financial Reporting Council for his immense support, and Dr. Ikechukwu Kelekume for moderating the first group discussion and professional advice throughout the project. The research team of the Society for Corporate Governance for its support in designing the survey framework, providing insight and expertise that greatly assisted in undertaking the survey. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not easy at such an occasion as this to list down all the outcomes of this survey. One may want to talk about all the recommendations gotten from this survey. I indeed admit being challenged by this research project, as I cannot but help thinking that I must also be change agent in the agri space, that I must do my best from my own standpoint regardless. Some of the findings of the research work include the need for intensive sensitization on the benefits of corporate governance to agricultural sector, ensure agricultural and agro-allied companies are more aligned to corporate governance regulatory frameworks to improve their business value, as well as ensure that activities, policies, and processes of agro-allied companies are economically, environmentally, socially sustainable, and much more. I've been reflecting on agricultural sector. The population is growing exponentially, and this means more food and drink is needed. One of the biggest problems today is knowing how we feed tomorrow. Not only tomorrow, but even today, over 200 million people. A huge part of the agri sector is devoted to solving this problem. And if you are part of it, you may well be making history. Like every industry. Agriculture does have its ups and downs, and it really does make a difference if you do your research into the sector and hold the future. In the long term, demand for agriculture is only going to rise, and the job opportunities and benefits will too. So if you are in it for the long haul, you'll find agriculture is a good place to be, and this research publication very valuable to you. As I close my remarks, I want to heartily commend all parties involved in this research, all who made this publication a reality for a job well done, and of course to challenge them to continue with the energy to serve in this space. Permit me to make a quotation, which says, we must grow what we eat, and we must eat what we grow. Your guess is as good as mine who made that. If you haven't gotten it right, it's President Muhammad Buhari. That underscores the importance of such service. With this remarks, it's my honor and privilege to declare this report survey official as a presentation to the public. Thank you for listening. I hereby present the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Barodo, for that presentation. I would like to draw the attention of the participants that the order form, it's on the chat box. You can fill up the order form, then we'll prepare for delivery. At this point, I'd like to call on the President, Mr. M.K. Ahmad ON, to give us short remarks. If you're ready, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chioma. And of course, as usual, thank you very much, panel of discussant, including our director, Icgm, and of course, our colleagues that have just presented the books. I think it's an honor and privilege, and to also acknowledge that Kerry's participation has, perhaps for the first time, attracted over 300 participants to our conference. I think that, for me, is a message, and it's something that we need to build on. But she also provided opportunity for us to collaborate. But my main discussion is on the ESG. Of course, whatever we discuss today, whether it's a stakeholder approach to corporate governance, is about ESG. And that takes me to the next issue. Today, we have launched a book largely in that respect, but perhaps given the understanding of participants as far as this emerging concept is concerned, perhaps maybe we need to start looking at having a webinar that will focus essentially on ESG, and I believe Rukaya would be willing to assist us, and particularly in respect of SMEs, basically. And perhaps that may also be an opportunity to now deep dive in terms of practices in Nigeria, whether at a corporate level or perhaps at a much smaller level. So once again, distinguished members of panelists, and of course our colleagues director that have made this possible, we want to thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. So at this point, I'd like to call on our director, Ms. Claire Omashe, to give a short closing remarks and possibly a note of appreciation to our sponsors and also to the attendees. Ms. Mashe, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chioma. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You will agree with me that today has been a very informative, very special conference. There's a quote by Cicero that says that gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all other virtues. So on this note, I feel very highly honored and privileged to be giving this vote of thanks on this remarkable occasion. It is a very big day for the Society of Corporate Governance Nigeria. We've hosted one of the biggest conferences we've had with quite a lot of attendees, over 350 attendees online, and another 300 or so that have joined through other social media. So it has been a huge success, and it couldn't have been a success without everybody in this room. So we've had a very insightful conference covering the and doing a deep dive on the topic of emerging trends in corporate governance on ESG, board diversity, regulations, foreign direct investments, and digital transformation. First, let me start by thanking our Honorable Chairman, Mr. Mohammed Ahmed, OON, and respected members of the Board of the Society of Corporate Governance Nigeria, and most valued members of the Society, ladies and gentlemen, for this honor to be here today, and most importantly, for your attendance. We feel very, very highly honored that you've been able to stay all the way to the end, and it has been very informative. First, let me also say another big thank you to our keynote address speaker, Ms. Kerry Waring, for sharing her insights on the best practices, how to improve best practices in corporate governance on a global scale, and sharing with us the Icgn principles to improve those practices, as well as talking about the environment and considering people, planet, and prosperity. To our panelists, Temi Popola, Rukaya El-Rufai, Rose Lumumba, and our able moderator, Nkendelim, it has been a great session on the panel, talking again about those trends and sharing your knowledge with us today and giving us your opinions on each of those various topics that we have as our theme. We were very well informed, and we would like to say a very big thank you for sharing that insight with us. Of course, I'd like to use this opportunity to also thank our directors, both Mr. Tijani Borodo and Professor Fabian Ojogo, SAN, for your in-depth presentation and the noble research that has gone into the publications that have been presented here today. Of course, this is available to all members and to all those who would like to buy copies of this research. Thank you very much for that insight. Now, this whole occasion couldn't have been made possible without the support of our numerous sponsors. So specifically to Zenith Bank PLC, Stanbic IBTC, Flour Mills of Nigeria, Polaris Bank, IVH Energy, Kenna Partners. We say a very big thank you to you for your enormous support and cooperation over the years, not just today, but being a strategic partnership, pushing the envelope on importance of corporate governance in Nigeria and making sure that we continue to raise the bar. I'd also like to say thank you to our digital partners, FutureSoft, and our press partners, ProShare Media. Now, finally, to the attendees and delegates of today's conference, my hat goes off to you. It has been a very insightful conference. Thank you very much for your questions. As you could see, Nkem could hardly keep to time because there was so much, involvement and interaction from you. It shows that you found this very valuable, and I'd like to thank you for, sharing your insights also and for asking those very stimulating questions. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot really say more than I said right now without overstepping my time limit. But I would just like to say this is the beginning of even greater things to come. The chairman has already given us a charge that we have a lot more work to do, especially when it comes to ESG. And we will, on behalf of the board and management of the society, be making efforts to make sure that we contact all the players, that we continue to raise the bar, we bring this education and awareness to not only Nigeria, but also global best practices. And we can really make sure that we promote best practices and good corporate governance in our country. I'd also like to say a very big thank you at this point to the management and staff of the Society of Corporate Governance. I know that you've been planning this for several weeks on end. Now you can breathe. It has been a great success, and we couldn't have been here today without you all completing your tasks on time. So on behalf of the board, we say a very big thank you to each of you. Finally, to our delegates, your presence here today just shows that strong commitment towards the promotion of corporate governance practices in our country. And we say thank you for staying all the way to the end. It has been a very stimulating and very instructive exchange of ideas. And you will agree with me that this has been a brilliant way of spending your mid-morning and afternoon. On this note, I say a very big thank you once again for everything, especially to our speakers, and do have a lovely rest of your day. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marshall, for that closing remarks and also a note of appreciation. At this point, we have a video message from our sponsors, also from the site for corporate governance. I can see on the chat that a lot of people are asking about how to join the Society for Corporate Governance. So we have a video to share about what we do, our services, training, board evaluation, and also how to join as a member. So please stay tuned and enjoy the videos.
The Society for Corporate Governance Nigeria is a registered not-for-profit organization. It is the foremost institution committed to the development of corporate governance and best practices in Nigeria. Our vision is to enhance the development of good corporate governance practices, while our mission is to be the leading player in the development and promotion of corporate governance best practices nationally and internationally. Our offerings include board evaluation and governance advisory, directors training and board enhancement programs, research and publications, and membership. Being a statutory requirement for corporate organizations, the Society for Corporate Governance assists organizations to evaluate their boards by conducting a board performance evaluation assessment to specifically measure and ultimately enhance performance and also mete out corporate governance advisory. The Society, as part of our learning programs, organizes executive and board enhancement programs designed to specifically address issues that affect different boards. Our upcoming programs include IT governance, implementing governance structure for data protection and cybersecurity, scheduled to hold on Thursday, October 28, 2021, and corporate governance and the pensions industries, scheduled to hold on Thursday, November 25, 2021. Our membership platform has a wide range of professionals interested in corporate governance and ethics. Membership of the Society is guided by the Constitution of the Society, and it is open to individuals who occupy managerial positions and above in their organizations, while our corporate membership is open to all corporate organizations, which include private, public, and registered firms. For more information on membership, please contact our membership desk via membership@corpgovnigeria.org or call 0703 157 2499. We also offer educative and informative research and publications. Our available publications include Biannual Journal of Corporate Governance, Company Secretary's Guide on Corporate Governance, 2nd edition, Corporate Governance and Regulatory Compliance, The Regulator, Regulations, and the Regulated, Corporate Governance and Sustainability Reporting in Nigeria, a review of 30 most capitalized companies on Nigerian Stock Exchange 2020, Corporate Governance Reporting in Nigeria 2019, Director's Handbook on Corporate Governance, Leading an Effective Board, the Chairman's Guide, Understanding Financial Statements and Reports, a Guide for Directors, Survey on the Board Structure and Corporate Governance for Microfinance Banks in Nigeria. To order any of these titles, please contact us via research@corpgovnigeria.org. Electronic copies of our publications are also available on Okada Books, Kobo Writing Life, and Amazon stores. SCGN, committed to the development of corporate governance. The Society
Once upon a time, an idea was born. It grew into one institution with a master plan. Since 1989, IBTC has evolved to become Stanbic IBTC, setting the base as one of the first holding companies in Nigeria. Over the years, we've expanded beyond banking to owning formidable business subsidiaries across 10 industries, all backed up with AAA Fitch rating. From becoming Nigeria's first registered pension fund administrator to being dubbed the best investment bank in Nigeria, the leading wealth manager, and the largest brokerage house in the country. With over 4,000 employees, our presence across the country is further strengthened by our efficient network of digital channels. Our dedication to the Nigerian dream has granted us recognition 44 times by 18 awarding bodies in 6 sectors, igniting possibilities for more Nigerians. And across the seas, we are proud to be champions of exponential trade finance through our partnership with the largest bank in the world, facilitated across 22 sectors. Nigeria is our home, and we are committed to driving her growth. So whatever your dream is, we believe it can be.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So on this note, I would like to say a very big thank you to everybody. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Please, we have our information on the screen. You could contact us to help your organization develop corporate governance framework. And also we have resources as we have shown in the video. So thank you very much and have a lovely day ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you so much. Thank you for attending. Thank you. A very big thank you to our sponsors as well. Sincerely appreciate your contribution. Thank you so much. Zenith Bank, Polaris Bank, Stanbic IBTC. Thank you so much. Flower Mills of Nigeria. We are sincerely grateful. Thank you. Thank you, Kenna Partners. Thank you, OVH Energy. Thank you. They're also corporate members of the society. I'd like to say a very big thank you. Flower Mills also is a corporate member of the society. Zenith Bank, corporate member of the society. I'm grateful for your contribution, not just for this year, even previous years. Thank you for your support of our efforts in developing corporate governance best practices. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please don't forget to join us. The membership details is also on the chat box. Don't forget to join us members. Don't also forget to fill out the order form for our publications. Thank you so much. Thank you, my directors. Thank you, Mr. Mashaye. Sincerely grateful. Thank you, Professor Ajogu. Thank you, Mr. Borodo. Thank you to my president, Mr. Ahmad. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for the encouragement as well. Thank you, Mr. Tunji Oyebanji. I see you're also online. Thank you so much. Sir, thank you so much. Sincerely grateful.
Thank you too, Madam Chioma Modi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bego. Thank you so much. Ms. Bego, thank you.
Well done. You and your team, you've done very well, Chioma. Well done.
Thank you so much.
I agree.
Great.
Well done.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Stop recording.
No, it's fine. The well done recorded is perfect.
Okay.
And that is what